And so we go to Russian history then, 1881 through to 1953, although this segment really is going to look predominantly at 1881 through to about 1905. So this is the AS course for EdXL. So 1881, the emancipation of the serfs had come about not many years prior to this, and the serfs had still not felt as though they were anything but slaves, really, to be honest with you, in Russia. 1881 sees the advent of the coming of Alexander III. Alexander III in Russia is vengeful of the death that had occurred in 1881. The Tsar had been assassinated. Alexander III now is the heir, and he's Tsar now. And from 1881 to 1894, this period we term the reaction. Well, what did this mean? This meant that Alexander III wanted to react against the death of the previous Tsar. He wants to react against all the freedoms that the Tsar had attempted to allow to be imposed in Russia at this time. Alexander III, from 1881 to 1894, is very influenced. He's influenced mainly by one key advisor. The key advisor is his old tutor, and that is Pobedony Estiev. Pobedony Estiev is very driven. He's driven by not only autocracy, by Tsarism, but also fundamentally by the Russian Orthodox Church, the ROC as we call it, the Russian Orthodox Church. Driven by this, Alexander III is heavily influenced into introducing very, very few what we would call real reforms. Yes, there are some land reforms. There are some instances where, if it's possible, serfs or peasants, as they are now known, are able to buy their own land. But in buying their own land, they would be then really hocked up to the eyeballs, really, as we would say today, with debt. And it was this sort of debt that they either A, couldn't afford, or B, just couldn't find possible. So in many ways, they were very much restricted by the life that had gone before them. They were restricted into still being, in essence, serfs. And so the emancipation of serfdom that had occurred prior to 1881 really had no great impact upon their lives. The Tsar, with his reaction, was hell-bent on ensuring that no attempts were made on his life or on his type of autocracy that existed in Russia. Now, this doesn't end in 1894 on his death. Alexander III's son, Nicholas II, takes over, and he is influenced just as much by the likes of Pobedony Estiev, but also by the likes of Sergei Vit. Now, Sergei Vit is also incredibly intent upon revolutionising Russia, but revolutionising Russia in an industrial manner, not in a social manner that will benefit the peasants, but in a way that would mean that, and he's the TMT, this would mean that autocracy stays alive. He wants industrialisation on the scale of Britain as the first industrial nation, Germany as the second industrial nation, and ultimately he wants to see Russia industrialised as well. I hasten to add, he doesn't see this. He doesn't see this, nor does either Alexander III or Nicholas II. And this means that, in essence, Russia is backwards. Russia is incredibly backwards. It doesn't change in great forms. It doesn't develop by strides. Trans-Siberian Railway, that's about it, folks. That's about it. But as we head into the 20th century, there is a rise of political movements. The populists, the liberals, and the Marxists. They're constantly on the rise during this period. And it's in the next piece of film that we'll take a look at the populists, the liberals, and finally the Marxists. And we'll see how they come to prominence. But by 1905, things in Russia were a little different from the 1881 coming of Alexander III to 1905. Why 1905? We'll pick up on that year next time.